and welcome to Season 4 of Lightwork Presents Everything is Connected, where we share the interesting and inspiring stories of artists, critical thinkers, thought leaders, and art professionals on a wide range of topics about life, work, society, success, failure, and the ways in which we navigate the journey. We share ideas on our inspirations and the influences that affect our lives. I'm your host, Folasade Ologundudu, and I look forward to sharing the conversations that I have with artists and creative professionals across the art industry and beyond. As I travel to art fairs, gallery openings, and events within the creative industries both in the U.S. and abroad, join me in discovering and learning about some of today's most interesting and dynamic artists and creative professionals. If you're new to the show, I'm happy to have you here. If you've been on this journey with me, welcome back. Let's get it. On this episode, I'm joined by Chiwoniso Kaitano, Executive Director of MacDowell, the nation's first artist residency program. She is the 10th person to lead the organization since 1907. Before joining MacDowell, Chi, as she's referred to, spent the last 4 years at the helm of Girl Be Heard, expanding its organizational budget, increasing individual giving by 200%, and growing both staff and the board. Prior to Girl Be Heard, Chi had served as the Executive Director of Ifetayo Cultural Arts Academy, a 30-year-old Brooklyn-based arts and culture organization. She is an avid traveler, having lived on 3 continents. She holds a law degree from the London School of Economics and a master's in international affairs from Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs. She also serves on the board of directors of 3 New York City-based nonprofits: the International Contemporary Ensemble, the Center for Fiction, formerly the Mercantile Library, and the Jazz Leaders Fellowship of Brooklyn Conservatory of Music. Originally from Zimbabwe, Chi currently lives in Brooklyn, New York. Let's dive into my next episode with Chiwoniso Kaitano.
My name is Chiwoniso Kaitano. I am Executive Director of MacDowell.
And you've been, firstly, thank you so much for joining me on an episode of Lightwork Presents Everything is Connected. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you today and learning a little bit more about the work that you do at the MacDowell Foundation.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here and to meet you. I've been a fan of the podcast for quite a while now.
Awesome. So let's jump right in. The MacDowell was founded in 1907. It's a very old institution, and you've been at the helm as its Executive Director since 2023, correct?
That's correct. I've been in the job about 18 months at this point. I started in March of 2023. We were founded in 1907, and I know people often don't think of us as an artist-founded residency, but we are. We were founded by a woman called Marion MacDowell, who is married to Edward MacDowell, who at the time was the Beyonce of his era, a rock star, music composer, and the inaugural dean of the Music Institute at Columbia University. And it was their private project. He would go into the woods and compose his music in the piece of A Few Acres in Bucolic, New Hampshire. And when he passed away in the early 1900s, his wife Marion continued the project, building the residency into sort of a version of what we know it as today.
And as its first Black executive director, which is a big title and potentially a lot to consider and think about, outside of that specifically, how do you approach the work that you do within the nonprofit sector? Because you come from a long career of working in this industry.
I think there was no one more surprised than I was to be recruited for the job and to be offered the job. I have had a varied career. I'm a human rights lawyer. That's what my academic credentialing is in, specifically in the laws of war, genocide, humanitarian law. But I did not spend a long time doing this. I've mostly worked in the nonprofit sector, but journeyed through a very brief, much less brief stint in software, and then ended up working at that nexus of nonprofits, but really on the social justice and arts education side. During COVID, what happened is, like most of us, I had a deep think about really what I wanted to do and aligning my values. And that led me to looking for a job directly in the arts, and MacDowell came along at just the right time. I remember in the early stages of me having a conversation with the board of directors and the recruiting team, I just wasn't sure that a heritage organization or a legacy organization like MacDowell would be a great fit for someone like me. I do bring a lens that is grounded in social justice work. I learned a lot from the community from which I came of how to show up as a leader in different spaces. Things that were once acceptable are no longer acceptable, and the new cultural arts outlook, as it were. So I was wary stepping into this job, and I know when the initial press went out about my appointment, they did lead with the fact that I was the first Black leader. And I thought that was interesting. I think it lends, I don't know what it gave to my announcement. I've been Black my whole life, so that wasn't a surprise for me. But it's been a surprise in MacDowell. I think the conversations around inclusion, belonging, diversity, and where sort of the cultural community and the artistic community fits into that is a conversation that began in MacDowell long before I arrived. And while outwardly, I think heritage institutions do have reputations for being, I'm going to say, white and maybe even steeped in Western ideology.
Absolutely.
What I've been encouraged to see most at MacDowell is sort of intentionality around these conversations and an acknowledgement that perhaps we haven't always done things the right way. And then also because I come from a part of my background is steeped in data, I looked at the facts about which communities we're serving at MacDowell. And in terms of the artistic communities we're serving, I'm so encouraged by the fact that we're diverse in all kinds of metrics. Our artist community is just incredible geographic diversity, gender, race, and of course artistic disciplines. And it's very encouraging to me.
Absolutely. I love that you shared that and you really expanded on your answer, because I'm thinking about a few things. But one of the things that's coming up is the fact that it was mentioned when you took the appointment and made public that you were the first Black ED. And thinking about if we took that off the center and didn't focus on that, as to your point, you've been Black your whole life, but really thought about someone who was bringing new ideas and a fresh perspective to a heritage and a legacy organization, that might be a more interesting story to tell, right?
I think that's the heart of it. And I've been around at MacDowell for 18 months, and in my interactions with our board members and the artist community and my staff people, that's what I lead with. I think I was hired as a change maker. I think there is a recognition that maybe the way artist residencies and artist support organizations have shown up in the past is maybe not directionally where we want to be pointing to for the next, say, 100 years. So the board was very intentional about this when they hired me. I'm looking forward to acting those changes. I say that this is the easiest part of my job. It isn't. Let's be realistic. Older organizations tend to have very entrenched ways of being. But I'm a patient person, and I've got an incredible team that I'm building, and the board is very supportive. And first and foremost, I think, recognize that change, not just at our institution, but institutions like ours, is overdue.
Absolutely. And then another question about the way you have such a diverse audience and a diverse sort of network and community that's already built in. Could you speak a little bit more about how that has impacted you and maybe potentially even inspired you in the last 18 months, being able to enter MacDowell, look at the lay of the land and say, wow, we impact and touch so many people, not only internally in the work that we do together as a collective, but the external impacts that our work has to various communities.
There is not a day that goes by when I do not interact with either a work of art that has been supported by MacDowell or an artist that has been a MacDowell Fellow. And I can give you the smallest of anecdotes. My husband is a university professor. He teaches at University of Toronto, and I spend a few days every month up there just to spend some time with him. And we did our favorite activity, which is a bookstore crawl. And we go to used bookstores and see if we can find hidden treasures. And bar none, every bookstore we went into was MacDowell Fellow after MacDowell Fellow, and that is a typical experience. And it's a typical experience whether you are doing a studio visit, a gallery, or you're at a museum. You can walk through the halls of Brooklyn Museum or the Met or MoMA, and you will see artists who are connected to MacDowell in the most incredible ways. And because disciplines we focus on, our world is just huge. It's broad. Not many people know this, but we've welcomed architects. and urban planners at MacDowell for a very long time. We support journalism and journalists. One of my favorite books and projects is by the journalist Jessica Bruder, who wrote the incredible Nomadland, Tracking Nomadic Communities in the Western United States. Incredible book. And that, I think, was supported in MacDowell. We do music composition as well. I think it allows us to really build a big tent. And when I'm out in the world talking to people about what makes MacDowell unique and what makes it a little different from other artist residencies, is we're not focused or grounded in one discipline. We do not curate our cohorts. If you're accepted as a MacDowell Fellow, you come and do your residency, and you might be connecting with a music composer, a novelist, a journalist, an architect, and you're all doing your residency at the same time. And it's really that sort of cross-pollination of ideas and minds that builds the MacDowell community and makes it just such a unique experience in the world of artist support organizations.
Wonderful. I'd like to move a little bit into your origins, which will bring us back to this a little bit later. But you are born originally from Zimbabwe, born and raised?
Born and raised.
And you attended your university?
In London.
In London. Did you spend any formative years in London?
Yes. So I am born and raised in Zimbabwe. I, to this day, consider myself a Zimbabwean American. I actually just became a citizen maybe 2 years ago. So all this time, 20 years plus in the United States, and very recently a citizen. And maybe that's a story for another time.
A story nonetheless.
But a story nonetheless. And I left Zimbabwe at 18 to go and pursue my undergraduate. I've got an older sister who was pursuing her undergraduate in the United States. And I just decided that maybe the US wasn't for me. And I did get into the London School of Economics, which was my absolute reach school, my dream school, and ended up having just the most incredible 3 years there. The Zimbabwe I grew up in was I'm going to say maybe an affluent milieu. My parents were very education forward and are strivers, and really made sure that we got the best education, but the best education at the time, and I'm talking about the late 80s, early 90s, was a colonial education. So my education had been steeped in British even geographies. And I didn't start learning that there was a world outside of the Commonwealth and the colonies and this very British and Western worldview until I got to the UK. And it sounds like a crazy thing to say, but the indoctrination of the colonial system to this day impacts us all. I've got friends from Nigeria, India, wherever. We talk about this all the time. It's the reason I speak the way I do. But yeah, London was formative for me. Loved my time there. And I studied law. And this is when I still thought I was going to go off and become a human rights lawyer, and that tack changed quite early on. But my 20s definitely for me were a period of exploration and figuring out what I really wanted to do.
Yes, it's funny how people come to that period of their life at different times. I would say by and large, young people are encouraged to come to that earlier, have that sense of exploration and self-discovery early on so that you can build later. But it's funny how some people come to that at a later point in their life, have a career, and then completely switch gears halfway through and decide, actually, this doesn't do it for me anymore. I want to try something new. Or my heart is not in it anymore and I'm not passionate anymore. I'd like to talk a little bit about the position that you had before you started at MacDowell with Girl Be Heard, where you were the executive director. But I'd also like to chart this space in between leaving the world of finance and economics and wanting to be a human rights lawyer, and then getting into the world of the nonprofits, but also this particular focus in the arts.
Yeah.
What do you think led you there?
I'm a shapeshifter, gear switcher, approve of making changes in your life. I don't think I'm not a linear person. I don't think in terms of this is the track. And I think what led me to study law was this sort of immigrant parent drive to have a lawyer and a doctor and maybe an accountant and an engineer. And I heard lately that investment banking has entered the foray. Like there are 5 professions you're allowed to have if you are raised culturally the way I was raised, with African parents who are strivers. And that's how I ended up studying law. Not because I thought I'd be a good lawyer, and not because I was particularly interested in any aspect of it. It's just what we did. And just floated around from job to job, spent 10 years of all things in software, working for a software startup, which is a job I call the good paycheck, but I'm not sure I got much out of it. Maybe ability to be hyper organized, because that's really all the job involved. And then it wasn't until maybe around the time my son was born, he's 13 years old now, that I really started thinking, what's going on, Kaitano? What do we really want to do? We've got all these academic credentials, we've got all of these ideas. I had begun building my network in the arts because I was running, at the time, a reading series, a salon called The Salon, and just really slowly coming to the realization that I'm interested in arts. And that's what I want to do. And I'm interested in arts as an arts leader. I knew I was happiest when I was the person calling the shots and making the decisions. And that's when I really started thinking intentionally, okay, I want to go into nonprofit arts administration. I think I want to be an executive director or a CEO. What is the path to that? And I think everything for me changed when I started being really strategic about that. MacDowell is and 2 other organizations before this, all very different. My first executive director job was this incredible Africa-centered arts education youth academy called Ifetayo, Brooklyn-based, started by this wonderful woman called Quayera Archer Cunningham, a real beacon in this community. So many people love and respect this woman. And she did have an impact on me when I was running this job. And then very quickly realizing that while I loved the administrative aspects of the job, I think I needed a bigger pond. And that led me to Girl Be Heard, which at the time it called itself a global NGO. It was a very young organization, 10 years old, and was started by a woman with like $300 in the bank, and it had grown into this sort of multi-million-dollar entity. And we were doing great work, and I loved the job. And it's actually the one job I think that really connected me to that intersection of community building, arts, youth organizing, and everything that meant. And I think about that job every day. I learned so much of that job. But I was a leader during COVID. And I was a leader during what we call now the racial reckoning. Mm-hmm. And it was an incredibly challenging job to have.
At that time.
But it had an incredible impact on me. And I was saying before, the ways I think about leadership and what leadership looks like. I learned more about showing up as a leader from the adolescent Black and brown girls and femmes I worked with and supported in that job. It was really transformative for me. I can't understate that.
I'm really struck by what you've just shared. I am one of those people who never thinks that anything is a coincidence, and is a real believer that you are on a path, and on your path you will meet other people and you will encounter situations that are guiding you. And to hear you speak about not only the transformative nature of what Girl Be Heard offered to you and gave to you, and the generosity that was found within the role, but the idea of young people really being reflective enough to maybe show one their own self, or show one how they can grow and how they can ascend, improve, all of those things. Can you dig a little bit deeper into that, and maybe, if you're comfortable, share something more specific, maybe a particular moment, or even some of the general things that you experienced? Because I feel that the point of adults and older professionals and people who are maybe more seasoned in their career being able to learn from a younger generation is a point that I would love for us to highlight.
I started this job at Girl Be Heard and I had a young team. Majority of the team, I would say, were under 30. I'm in my late 40s, to give you some perspective. And generationally, I thought I was in sync. I had a small child. I thought I was in sync with what was going on. And only to arrive at this job with, I think I can best describe it as my corporate self, and being educated by these young women into how I was showing up with my ways of doing things that were not benefiting my team of mostly women of color and the community we were serving. I did not, we were just talking about how in Zimbabwe I received this colonial education. That's new language to me. I was taught this at Girl Be Heard. I had not, it sounds incredible because I'm a very self-aware and analytical person, but I'd never really framed my education in the context of, yes, I received a colonial education. There's a reason why I can quote Shakespeare, any play, but I couldn't tell you the plotline for Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart, which is a book I've read, but this is how conditioned we were. And it was connecting with the young people in this job that were really my window into seeing that we don't necessarily have to engage with our organizations and engage and do our jobs in the way that we've been trained to do them by, I'm going to say, dominant power structures. And that's a real thing. I truly believe everyone's contribution and the sort of the complex organism of an organization is important. I believe leadership shows up in different ways. We're in the middle of election season here in the United States, and we're very conditioned to thinking that a leader comes in the suit of the flesh of a white male, and the Barack Obamas are the exceptions, and the whispers about Vice President Harris is what has she done to deserve being there? Because optically, we're not conditioned to see leadership in all of these other forms. And I think that was my sort of big learning from that job, that these young women and femmes were leading in their lives and were showing the world how to lead. And leadership and making an impact looks like all different kinds of things, and that's good. And we shouldn't be afraid of change. And I like to think that maybe I played a small part in building this community and having these young people like thinking this way, and my job in exposing them to the world and telling them that the world is yours. You can make your rules and build and create and make this world in your vision. Yeah.
Incredible. And I think what's coming up for me is the idea that so much of what I would imagine is how you approach your work today is deeply influenced by what happened there.
100%. 100%. And in different ways. I walked into a MacDowell that had, can I use the word survived? I don't know. Maybe, let's say interrogated, had spent some time interrogating all of the questions that were raised during the Great Pause and the racial reckoning. So in a way, I am a product of those discussions that happened before me. A lot of credit goes to my predecessor at MacDowell, Philip Himberg, who, from what I understand, was the driver of many of these conversations. But I've talked about the MacDowell board a lot. A lot of credit goes to our board of directors, who many longtime board members, and I know from talking to other executive directors, boards can be challenging, but a credit to this board for just reading the room and meeting the moment.
I've been thinking a bit about what you shared about leadership and that there are many different styles of leadership. What would you say are some of the styles of leadership that you embody, and what are some of the ones that have been newly adopted by you or newly informing the way that you approach your work?
I'm a servant leader, and yeah, this is one of my favorite topics, talking about I'm a management nerd, management and leadership. I think my style is servant leadership, and by that, I really want to make sure that my team at work is happy and thriving and feel that they are supported in doing their best jobs. I want our constituents, our artists, we are, after all, an artist support organization, to feel that MacDowell has their best interests in heart, and everything we do is embodying that, every interaction that they have with our team and our staff. So that's really how I see myself. I am in service to the artists, but I'm also in service to art. And then more broadly, someone in my ecosystem, I forget who, was reminding me that MacDowell is the table. Everyone talks about the seat at the table, and MacDowell, because it is a heritage organization, we're old, we evolved the original idea of an artist residency in the United States, and so many have been modeled after us. we do have a responsibility to lift all boats, and I take that sort of responsibility seriously. As I move through the arts ecosystem in Universe, yes, I'm uplifting my organization, but my goal really is to uplift the work of all artist residencies and all artist support organizations. And I think with our power, let's say, that we have in the world, just wielding that power for good and making sure that the smaller residencies, new ones are forming every day, have a chance at success, because it's this sort of big, thriving ecosystem that will help our sector thrive.
As we round up the episode and come to a close, what are some of the things that are right now top of mind for you that you're really excited about, looking forward to as you think about the history of MacDowell, but also the continuation of your work and your interests and your passions within the role?
I'm really thinking about, are we doing enough to support artists? And I think for a long time, the formula for most artist residencies was time and space and perhaps community. And certainly that's been the case for MacDowell for decades at this point. We're at the part of the story where we're asking ourselves, is there something more? So we give you time to come to MacDowell. You can come for 2 to 6 weeks. You've got the space. You get a private studio, somewhere to sleep. You get nourishment in the form of meals. All of that is taken care of. But we're really asking ourselves, is there something else out there? And what we're hearing when we ask our community is financial support is actually the key driver right now. And I think financial support has become an access issue. If you're an artist who is lucky enough to be in a 2-income household, let's say, or to have other means of support, or maybe you've been successful with some of the work you've produced, you're financially in a different position than 80% of the people who come to MacDowell. And what I really want to do is to get our organization in a position where we can significantly financially support artists to come and do their residence. And what does that look like? We don't know yet. Is that right now we give pretty modest stipends, $1,500 to $2,000. But what would it look like? What would our artist pool look like if we were giving you $10,000, $25,000, let's say, and you could come for a longer, more sustained period at MacDowell and really be free of distraction and worry? Would that be game-changing for our artistic community? So I'm excited about that and exploring what that looks like. And personally, I don't know. I feel I'm new. I'm new to this ecosystem. I'm still on my knowledge gathering tour and having so much fun with it and meeting so many people, meeting you. This has been such a pleasure.
So lovely.
And just like really getting stuck in and figuring out other ways I can support and amplify and all of those things.
Wonderful. Last question before we round out the episode. If there are folks who are listening, who are interested, who hear and want to learn more and get involved, what do they do?
Go to our website. Our website is the beast, but there's so much information there. Everything from who we are historically, and you can get a feel for the kind of people we've welcomed in our community. Everyone from James Baldwin, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Faith Ringgold, Colson Whitehead. Everyone's passed through MacDowell at some point. Yeah, so do some research about our artistic community. It's huge and it's across 7 disciplines. But also we have information about applying. If you're an artist and you're thinking about applying, we're very competitive. I will be honest about that. We're getting, and it's not just unique to us. I've talked to other residency directors and they're in the same boat. We're getting thousands and thousands of applications for limited spots. But yeah, have a look at the application, and if you think you would like to contribute to our community, apply.
Thank you so much for joining me. This has been an incredible episode. And to everyone listening, if you're interested in the MacDowell Foundation, please check out their website to find more information about them and all of the ways that they can support your projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sade. This was a pleasure.
That was my episode with Chiwoniso Kaitano. I want to give a big thank you and a big shout out to Chi for joining me on the show.
And it's a wrap, folks. That was our episode of Everything is Connected, conversations on culture and current events with some of today's hottest creative contemporaries. These episodes are recorded remotely and on location wherever in the world I find myself, whether that be the US, Africa, Europe, the Middle East, the Caribbean, and more.
Depending on where I am at the time of these recordings, you will hear the sights and the sounds of my local environment. I look forward to continuing these wonderful conversations with artists and creative professionals across industries with you. I'm your host, Folasade Ologundudu, and we'll see you next time. As always, stay motivated, stay inspired, and stay up. Peace and love, y'all. We out.